Kalani Sitake, as well as his coordinators, addressed the media on National Signing Day earlier today, and they had a lot of positive things to say about BYU, but the big question that remains, will they have enough to make a title run?
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, 14-year credentialed media member at BYU, your resident expert and insider, as your host here on this show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today, and thank you for making all of us over at Locked On, the #1 sports podcast network. Coming up on today's show, a little special edition for your evening commute, talking about reactions to the National Signing Day press conferences that BYU held today. Well over an hour of BYU coaches addressing the media, Kalani Sitake, his coordinators, including some new hires and guys like DeMario Warren. So the overall tenor is what we're going to get into of what I took away, and we'll share just kind of what I think of the BYU football program as they now look forward to the 2026 season, and more importantly, getting back to work on the 2027 recruiting class. So it's all coming up on today's show, a little shorter edition. We're calling these Jeff Hansen, our good friend over at Cougar Sports Insider, coined the phrase daily dose. This is kind of like your bi-daily dose. I don't know. So we'll think of an idea for the name of this, but getting right out of the chute here is talking with the coaches, and I was on those press conferences earlier today, is that the overall vibe around BYU, very, very positive. And honestly, I think Kalani Sitake, Kelly Poppinga, anybody else involved on BYU's coaching staff, Aaron Roderick, etc., the vibe around the program is, hey, we're going to keep doing what we do. And that has been a very, very strong, successful run over the past 2 seasons, but they just want to level it up and really accomplish their goals. And those goals are winning the Big 12 conference and obviously playing in the college football playoff. Now, you can do one or the other of those in different ways because you can make the playoff without winning the Big 12 in theory and vice versa. But I look at the situation at hand here, and BYU knows what they're up against. They look around at the rest of the conference. They look at Texas Tech, who has splashed major cash in the NIL sphere. They look at upstarts like a Houston, who I think has put together a very, very fine offseason in terms of their additions to what they're doing with the Houston Cougars. And I think BYU understands that they want to remain atop this conference, speaking of the Big 12, and they understand that they've got the talent in particular this year to make a run at it, but they're trying to build for the future editions of the BYU football program, and that's what I take away from this recruiting class. For those of you who are everydayers, may have caught our podcast, if I can use the right terminology. Earlier today, we talked about the fact that this is, in my opinion, and I think many people's opinion, the best recruiting class in BYU football history. There are guys who are going to enroll right away, guys like Devon Eka, the Pula twins. They've got a bunch of players, Nehemiah Kalone, etc., who are already on campus as early enrollees from the high school ranks. They made very targeted additions via the transfer portal as well. But then they also have guys like Ryder Lyons and Brock Harris headlining the guys who went out on missions and will be back at a later date for the BYU football program. And all of that is going to coalesce in theory into putting together a season this year. I think BYU and Kalani Sitake hope is one for the ages, and that is truly living out the dreams that they have been on the cusp of for the better part of the last 2 seasons. And if they can do that, that's fantastic, because it means that this year's recruiting class could be surpassed by next year's recruiting class, because what attracts talent, even to a program like BYU that is a church-affiliated school, is winning. You win football games, and you're going to recruit at a very high level. And I think BYU, Kalani Sitake, and his coaching staff understand that at a very, very deep level, and they plan on winning at a high clip. The other thing about this, just kind of general vibe coming out of this, and we'll get to some specifics in just a moment of what I took away from what different coaches had to say. I have a handful of those I want to get into, but the other thing I want to pass along is that Kalani Sitake is not a coach who's going to stand idly by and let things be as they are. He is always, and I mean always, looking to find the next, leg up, the next area, like probably determines margins that you can exploit that can help you win. Because let's be real, at the Power 4 level, you have the best college football programs in the entire country, and BYU, in some people's minds, is a minnow swimming in a tank full of sharks. And in some ways, they are doing just that. But what BYU has proved the past 2 seasons in particular, they can swing with those big sharks. They can absolutely compete with the best of the best. But obviously, they need to be able to get over the top, beat a Texas Tech, go to the college football playoff. And the biggest thing, I think, for the Big 12 as a whole is find somebody who can win a darn game in the playoff. That's kind of the one bugaboo about this league right now. It's getting kind of a bunch of shade cast at it by national media and the like, is if the Big 12 can start winning, and BYU could be a part of that, actually winning games when it ultimately matters. That means playing in the playoff and advancing. That's what's going to bring respect and really make people think, okay, maybe BYU is a shark. They're not the minnow we thought they were. And we'll see if that ultimately comes to fruition. But I think the BYU knows what they're up against, and what they're doing is they're never going to have the top end budget. They're never going to have the best and brightest in terms of facilities and the like. But what BYU has is a strong culture, a strong identity, and a darn good football program that has proven itself to be a winning program, and that attracts talent. And Kalani Sitake hopes to continue to do that well on into the future. So a couple of things, not more than a couple, but handful of things I took away in specific about what to take away from the signing class, including some guys that you'll want to keep an eye on as a BYU football fan as we move forward on into spring camp. And we'll dig into that momentarily right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff this Sunday. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it all with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite and speaking of the Seattle Seahawks, you're going to ride with the underdog in the New England Patriots, or you're just going to build a single same game parlay around players and other things in the game. This game is the one everyone's been waiting for. It's where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger than the last. It's the perfect way to cap the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. For your new customer, you can bet just $5 right now and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. It's one last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Thank you for being here on Locked On Cougars. Please continue to subscribe, rate, and review. Share the show with your family and friends. And if you're so inclined, you're a true everydayer, want to take it to the next level, as we like to call it, join the Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. Go to lockedoncougars.supercast.com to get all the details. But access to ad-free audio episodes, members-only Discord server access. If you want Locked On merch, it's all available to you guys. LockedOnCougars.supercast.com. All right, so a couple of takeaways before we wrap up this edition of the show from the National Signing Day press conferences are that BYU knows that they have got talent in this program, but hearing in particular DeMario Warren talk about, hey, we've got a bunch of guys in the secondary that we're going to put through their paces, and him along with Lewis Morgan taking over as the cornerbacks coach is going to be a revamped defensive secondary coaching tandem, and these players are going to have to prove themselves. I don't think that DeMario or Lewis are dumb enough to say, hey, Trey Alexander, Evan Johnson, Falatau Satuela, your spot's in jeopardy, earn it again. But at the same time, you want to push these guys. You want them to take the next step or steps in their career. And new coaches with new voices can do just that. And that's kind of the vibe I got talking with both of them as they take over these positions at BYU. You also can tell these two guys, they're very motivated to prove themselves. They know they're coming into a staff that's got a lot of continuity, a lot of guys who've got seniority on them, and they want to fit right in. And I think the vibe around those two in particular is very, very positive. We also heard from Justin Enna as BYU special teams coordinator. He was very upbeat about, hey, special teams can be an impact, and I'm not going to tweak a ton of what Kelly did, but he said some things we'll obviously look at. He talked about the fact that there is hopefully some positive momentum towards Sam Vanderhaar getting his year of eligibility back, and that would be a positive. as I understand it, based on people I have talked to about Sam, is they're hoping to hear back very, very soon on that. We're talking like in the next few weeks ahead of the start of spring camp, because kind of important to know who your punter is. Fuller Shirts will be the guy, it appears, if not. And then at kicker, he mentioned the fact that Matthias Dunn is going in as the incumbent because he was the backup last year. But he mentioned the name Ian Sanchez as well as Brody Laga as guys who are going to compete in that competition. Now, Brody Laga is going to come home off of mission in April, so he'll be home in time to work out over the summer and go into training camp and compete. But Ian Sanchez, for those of you who have forgotten this kid, he was a standout kicker at Lone Peak High School, and I called a number of the games during his high school career, and I'm telling you, this kid is nails. Now, I'm talking about a high school kicker, and we all know that each level you jump in terms of kickers, you have to obviously prove it at that level. But I'm telling you, Ian Sanchez seemingly has unlimited range as a kicker, and everything that I saw from my perch calling those games is he is tough as nails in terms of like the mental aspect of the game. So keep an eye on Ian Sanchez in that competition, because he may be home off of a mission, but he's got the goods, in my opinion, to be an impact player for BYU in special teams as a kicker. Moving over to offense in particular with Aaron Roderick, I thought A-Rod was very praiseworthy in talking about Devon Eka and saying that Devon absolutely has a chance to be a force at running back. He said there is a position, in his opinion, that a true freshman coming in early out of high school can play right away at. He believes it's running back, and history suggests that. Jamal Williams did that when he was an early enrollee way back in the day at BYU. And Devon Eka, what I've seen from him playing at Lehigh High School, he has got every skill necessary, I think, to be a very, very capable back at the next level. My only concern is, can they bulk him up a little bit? I think he's just a little bit skinny, but that's just me quibbling with one thing. But it was very good to hear, because we've lamented the fact that BYU didn't bring in a transfer portal target at running back. I think it's positive to hear that A-Rod is high on Devon Eka's chances of contributing early if everything goes according to plan. He was also very high on Enoch Watson. I'm telling you, I've heard from people that I trust that Enoch Watson could be a future star for BYU if given the opportunity. I think he's going to be a high-level number 2 behind Bear Bachmeyer as the incumbent as a starter, but also don't discount Trayson Bourget. He's a veteran voice in that room, knows the offense about as well as anybody, and I think that trio is going to be a very good one for BYU at quarterback, and I do think they will still add another body to that room ahead of the year-long mission that Ryder Lyons is embarking on currently to Orlando, Florida. Final couple of notes here. Also, talking to Kelly Poppinga, he was interesting to hear him say that he believes that Cade Uluwave is more of an inside linebacker, but has the capability and potentially replacing Jack Kelly. Now, if you pay attention to BYU's defensive alignment last year, Jack Kelly played the weak side linebacker. They usually call it a wheel linebacker spot, which is more of a kind of a hybrid pass rush spot. Maybe Cade Uluwave moves into middle linebacker. Maybe Siale Serra plays weak side linebacker. I don't know. It was just interesting to hear Kelly talk about him being more of an inside option, but that's what Cade played at Cal. I just thought with his pass rush grade from PFF and the like, because his pass rush grade was like 90.5, which is downright elite. Speaking of PFF grades, if he can really rush the passer, why not try him out of that Jack Kelly spot? So it was interesting to hear K-Pop say kind of both things, that he thinks he's more of an inside linebacker, but has a skill set that could earn him time playing. And he also mentioned the fact there's a lot of competition there. Isaiah Glasker, Sialia Serra, Ice Kafusi, Miles Hall, Nusi Taumoepeau. By the way, I am very, very high on Nusi Taumoepeau, and I think he's going to be an absolute star for BYU. So keep an eye on him at linebacker as well. And the final note I've got for you guys in terms of just specifics is Sione Puha said that he's going to be coaching the players that he says play in the box. And what he meant by that, he said 5 technique to 5 technique. And if you're unaware what a 5 technique is, when it comes to defensive alignments, they go each gap. So we're talking head up on the center is called a 0 technique. That's what a nose tackle plays, is a 0 technique, head up on the center. And then you go out from there. Every half man, if this is going to be very convoluted, I have to try to describe it in another video, but every half man is a number. So just outside either side of the center, between that gap between them and the guard, is a 1 tech. 3 tech is between the guard and tackle, and then a 5 tech is out on the tackle. So essentially, what we're hearing from Sione Puha is he's going to coach essentially the entire defensive line, but mainly defensive tackles and guys who play more of the call it a run stuffing type position, while the edges are going to be coached up, it appears, by Chad Kauha'a. So cool to hear that in terms of how the delineation is going to go there along the defensive line. So a couple of quick thoughts for you guys. I'll have more on this tomorrow. I do want to talk about return missionaries. We'll do it on our full edition coming up tomorrow. Enjoy the BYU basketball game tonight. Obviously, BYU and Oklahoma State. Fingers crossed the Cougars get back into the win column, get some positive momentum going back their way. We'll have a reaction to that. As I mentioned, we'll talk about return missionaries that BYU has enrolled right now, as well as future guys ahead of the upcoming season. And I may also take a little look at BYU softball because they actually start their season tomorrow. And if there was a program that thought it was going to really be up against it when BYU jumped into the Big 12, BYU softball was right there among them. But what they have proven is they've been pretty adaptable to life at the Power 4 level. So it's a positive thing for the BYU softball program. So as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. For those of you on video, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 Locked On YouTube channel. You can get more Locked On content there. If you're listening on audio, please subscribe, rate, review. And as always, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. And if, like I said, on audio, go check out Locked On College Football as your next second listen of the day. And once again, come back tomorrow, bright and early tomorrow morning, with another full edition of Locked On Cougars, and be an everyday right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.